What if I told you that two convicted murderers escaped one of America's most secure prisons using tools smuggled inside frozen hamburger meat? This isn't a movie plot, it's a true story of Richard Matt and David Sweat, who orchestrated an escape so brilliant it left authorities completely stunned. They crawled through the prison's guts for months, and when they finally emerged, they left behind a single mocking note for the guards. "Have a nice day." How did they pull off the impossible, and what role did one lonely prison worker, manipulated by charm, play in all of this? Well, the details are even crazier than you can imagine. It all began behind the grim walls of Clinton Correctional Facility in Dannemora, an imposing 150-year-old fortress so remote and cold, locals called it Little Siberia. This maximum security prison, with its towering walls and armed watchtowers, are designed to be escape-proof. For inmates Richard Matt and David Sweat, Clinton was the last stop. Both were serving long sentences for murder with no chance of parole. Matt, 48, was charismatic and cunning, a career criminal doing 25 years to life for a brutal homicide. Sweat, 34 years old, was quieter and more reserved, serving life without parole for killing a sheriff's deputy. Despite their age difference, the two became friends on the inside. They first met in Clinton's Honor Block, a housing unit for inmates with good behavior. They bonded over art and drawings. Matt was an avid painter who taught Sweat how to sketch, and over their shared dreams of freedom. They had nothing to lose, and, like many other inmates facing the prospect of spending their entire lives behind bars, they began to consider escape. But unlike the others, they were resolutely determined. Matt could paint lifelike portraits, and he used that skill to win favor. They gifted guards and staff with pretty paintings or drawings in exchange for small luxuries or trust. Over time, the two inmates quietly gathered allies and privileges. They learned the prison's ins and outs by assisting electricians and plumbers on maintenance jobs. As they fixed wiring or unclogged pipes under supervision, they paid close attention to the layout behind the walls. The tunnels, the shafts, the plumbing lines, each day was a chance to scout for a weakness in the prison's defenses. By early 2015, Matt and Sweat had mapped out a way to break out of Clinton Correctional, something no one had ever done from the maximum security wing in the prison's 150-year history. They had noticed that behind their cell wall lay a web of shafts and pipes. If they could cut through the steel and reach those hidden passages, maybe they could tunnel their way out. It sounded like a Hollywood plot, but they were deadly serious. They just needed tools and a little inside help. That help came in the form of Joyce, or Tilly, Mitchell, a 51-year-old woman who supervised the prison's tailor shop. But Joyce wasn't just an accomplice. She was the target of a masterful psychological game. Around 2014, she developed a cozy relationship with Dave Sweat. But when he was moved, Richard Matt saw his opening. Matt, a career criminal and brilliant manipulator, didn't see a prison employee. He saw a lonely, middle-aged woman starved for excitement and attention. He found her insecurities and exploited every single one. He wasn't just asking for tools, he was selling her a fantasy, a new life, away from her boring marriage with a man who made her feel seen. She wasn't just smuggling hacksaw blades in her mind, she was helping her future husband escape. Playing to her emotions, Matt and Sweat realized Joyce Mitchell was the perfect pawn. They finally told her what they needed most: real tools to cut through metal and walls. In February 2015, Joyce agreed to sneak in some hacksaw blades. She hid 6 slender blades inside a package of raw ground beef. A bizarre hiding spot, but one she hoped would avoid suspicion. It worked. A friendly guard officer, Gene Palmer, unwittingly delivered the meat to Matt and Sweat's cell area, as Joyce requested, not realizing he was handing over the keys to an escape. Later, in the privacy of their cells, Matt slit open the meat and retrieved the blades. And so, the most audacious phase of their plan began. Imagine the scene. It's 2 a.m. The prison is dead silent. Sweat is crammed at the back of his cell, a tiny hacksaw blade in his hand. He waits, and waits, for the distant clang of a pipe or the hum of a ventilation fan. Only then does he dare to make a sound. With every screech of the blade against steel, his heart pounds. A single footstep from a passing guard, one unlucky cough, and this entire plan, months in the making, would be over. Every single night was a gamble with the rest of his life. After about a month of this secret labor, they each had carved a man-sized hole in the back of their cell. Behind those walls lay a narrow utility corridor, a sort of hidden shaft between cell blocks. It was pitch dark and dusty, but crucially, it led somewhere. Slipping through their new openings, Matt and Sweat discovered a complex maze of pipes and maintenance catwalks. They even devised simple dummies in their beds, stuffing clothes under their blankets and using rolled-up sweatshirts as a head to fool the guards on nighttime rounds. Incredibly, it worked. On some nights, both men were out crawling through the guts of the prison while guards glanced into their cells and assumed they were sound asleep. In the tunnels, they had to break through a brick wall and then confront a large steam pipe that blocked their way. They realized any loud attempt to break it would alert the prison, so they patiently used their saw blades to cut a hole into the pipe. It was slow, perilous work, but eventually they opened the pipe enough to crawl through. Joyce later smuggled in more tools, a pair of chisels, some drill bits, and a hole punch, using the same meat passing trick. With those in hand, the conspirators had everything needed to finish their tunnel. For weeks, the two inmates methodically picked their escape route through the prison's underbelly. They chiseled out a section of brick and slipped into a closet-sized space around the steam pipe. Then, they spent many midnight hours slicing through the thick pipe. They worked only when the steam was turned off at night to avoid being boiled alive. In that cramped and sweltering space, Sweat's athleticism was invaluable. He contorted himself through narrow passages, climbed up and down with ropes, and cut metal in claustrophobic heat. He even made sure his partner trimmed down. Matt had a larger belly, and Sweat, fearing that he might not squeeze through the tight spots, put him on a diet and exercise regime. By early June 2015, after 4 months of plotting and digging, the escape route was ready. They had opened a hole into the steam pipe and followed it to its end, which was underneath a manhole cover outside the prison's main wall. One final obstacle. A locked chain on the manhole had been quietly cut during a test run. Freedom was just a few steps away. The breakout was scheduled for the night of June 5th, 2015. Matt and Sweat had also roped Joyce into a getaway plan. She was supposed to meet them with her car near a power plant adjacent to the prison and drive them far from Dannemora, possibly all the way to Mexico. But on the night of the escape, Joyce Mitchell lost her nerve. Instead of waiting in her car as planned, she checked herself into a hospital, claiming a panic attack. The getaway driver never arrived. Unaware that Joyce had cold feet, Matt and Sweat proceeded with their escape. After the 11 p.m. head count passed, with guards casually noting 2 sleeping forms in cells 134 and 136, the inmates made their move. They grabbed the bags of supplies they had prepared, including water, snacks, extra clothes, even a few tools, and a makeshift map, and slipped through the holes at the back of their cells into the bowels of the prison one last time. Moving swiftly and silently, they navigated their now familiar route, down the metal catwalk, through the opening in the brick wall, and into the yawning steam pipe. They shimmied through that pipe for what seemed like an eternity, dragging their supplies with them, hearts pounding. At last, they reached the end of the line, the underside of the manhole cover. They'd already cut the chain, and now it was time to push open the lid. Shortly after midnight, on June 6th, Richard, Matt, and David Sweat emerged from a manhole on the quiet residential street in Dannemora, outside the prison walls. For a moment, they simply breathed in the cool night air as free men, a sensation they had almost forgotten. Then reality set in. They needed to get moving, and fast. They were free, but their escape plan was unraveling. Their ride was nowhere to be found. Matt and Sweat decided to improvise and get as far away on foot as possible before dawn. Within minutes, they had a close call. A local man arriving home late spotted them and yelled in alarm. Sweat quickly apologized, claiming they were lost, and the homeowner, unaware of who they really were, let them go. It was a narrow escape within their escape, but they slipped away into the darkness. By early morning, Clinton prison officials realized something was very wrong. At the 5:30 a.m. bed check on June 6th, guards found 2 empty cells with only dummy bundles left under the sheets. An alarm was raised and the facility went into lockdown. Guards searched frantically and soon they found the escape route. The gaping holes in the cells, the tunnel, and the discarded clothing. Next to the pipe, they found a note left by the escapees. A hand-drawn cartoon smiley face in a hard hat, and the words, "Have a nice day," scrawled cheekily. It was a taunt to their captors. Matt and Sweat were gone. The impossible had happened. Governor Andrew Cuomo arrived at the scene to inspect the tunnel himself, astounded at the ingenuity on display. He told reporters the plan was elaborate and sophisticated, almost like something out of a movie. Within hours, an enormous manhunt was underway. Eventually, more than 1,000 law enforcement officers from state, local, and federal agencies swarmed the region in the largest search in New York State history. They set up roadblocks on every highway and back road around Dannemora, scrutinizing every vehicle. Helicopters thumped overhead, searching the woods with infrared cameras. Officers went door to door in town, asking residents if they'd seen anything suspicious. The entire area was on edge. Local schools closed and nervous residents double-checked their locks at night, knowing 2 desperate killers were out there somewhere. For over 2 weeks, Matt and Sweat managed to elude capture in the Adirondack wilderness. They moved mostly at night, trekking through thick woods, swamps, and thickets of mosquitoes. By day, they likely hid in gullies or empty hunting cabins to avoid detection. They were hungry, cold at night, and exhausted, but they kept on pushing. Early on, their goal had been to reach the Canadian border, roughly 30 miles to the north, and slip into Quebec, but traveling on foot with limited supplies was slow going. Around June 20th, 2015, 2 weeks into their run, the fugitives stumbled upon an empty cabin near a place called Owl's Head, about 20 miles from the prison. Inside, they hit a jackpot of sorts. Food, water, a rifle or shotgun, and a road map on the wall. They spent a little time there, resting, eating, and plotting their next moves. But this break would also lead to their undoing. The cabin's owner came by and noticed signs of intruders, a misplaced coffee pot, items not as he left them, and he quickly alerted authorities. Investigators found the escapees' DNA on items in the cabin and realized that they were closing in. The wilderness was breaking them, but it was breaking Matt faster. He was exhausted and in pain, slowed down by liquor he'd found and indulged in. His talk of violent shootouts and taking hostages was becoming a liability. For Sweat, the choice was brutal. Stick with his partner and get caught, or abandon him and have a real shot at freedom. So, one morning, as Matt was struggling to get up, Sweat made a decision that sealed his partner's fate. He quietly took his share of the supplies, the map, and without a word vanished into the woods, leaving Matt completely alone. Now, on his own, Richard Matt only made it a few more days. On June 26th, law enforcement officers focusing on the area around Malone, New York, heard what sounded like a gunshot in the woods. Acting on this lead, a tactical team of U.S. Border Patrol agents and state troopers cautiously swept through the forest. Tucked among the trees, Matt heard the crunch of boots on leaves. He had the stolen shotgun with him and decided that he wasn't going back to prison. As the agents neared, Matt actually had them in his sights and was ready to shoot, but in a twist of fate, before he could pull the trigger, he let out a cough. It was sudden and involuntary, likely a result of stress or the damp cold he'd endured. That tiny noise gave him away. In an instant, agents zeroed in and shouted for him to drop his weapon. Matt refused and tried to aim for them. A Border Patrol marksman fired a single shot. The bullet struck Richard Matt, killing him instantly, and ending his run then and there. With Matt dead, the manhunt refocused entirely on capturing David Sweat. It took 2 more days. On June 28th, just a mile and a half from the Canadian border, David Sweat was spotted by Sergeant Jay Cook, a New York State police officer on patrol. Sweat was walking along a rural road in broad daylight. He had grown impatient and was moving during the day, a mistake that made him visible. The officer recognized Sweat and ordered him to stop. Sweat's response was to take off and run across an open field, desperately trying to reach a line of trees. Sergeant Cook gave chase on foot, but Sweat was fast, even in his weakened state. Realizing the fugitive might slip away, Cook raised his handgun, steadied his aim, and fired twice from a distance. Both shots hit their mark, and Sweat fell to the ground, wounded but alive. The 3-week manhunt was finally over. As Governor Cuomo said, the nightmare is finally over. In the aftermath, the state investigation revealed a web of complacency and incompetence at the prison. Multiple staff were fired or disciplined for missing the warning signs. Joyce Mitchell pleaded guilty for her role and was sentenced to up to 7 years behind bars. Through tears, she told the court that helping those inmates was the worst mistake of her life, and that she wakes up every day filled with regret. Officer Palmer and others faced charges or lost their jobs. Clinton Correctional implemented new security measures to ensure such a breach would never happen again. As for David Sweat, he recovered from his injuries and was placed in harsh solitary confinement, 23 hours a day alone, to serve his remaining days. When reflecting on why they risked everything, Sweat explained that a life of dying slowly in prison was no life at all. One note that Richard Matt had left behind summed it up. "You left me no choice but to grow old and die in here. I had to do something." If you enjoyed this Prison Break case, check out the channel. There you'll find many great stories just like this one. If you like what you see, please subscribe. I'd be very grateful, and I'll catch you next time.